All right, Shalom, Shalom. First and foremost, as always, I'd like to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachahak, Wadash, double honors unto the apostles and others, the great millstone who rule well. Salutations to you, sincere, hopeful elect Akim, that push the word of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, in spirit and in truth. To Ma'ah, Arabai, Alak, which is to say 144,000. Shalom to you. All right, that's what we are striving to be of, us Akim that are of the hopeful elect, striving in this ministry, preaching this word, um, and to the sincere believers, Shalom. So this lesson, I believe, is I'll title it "Protests and Uproars: A Sign of Esau's End." Okay, now we'll get the scriptures to edify on that. But when you see all these uproars and protests going on, on various continents, that's a clear sign that Esau's kingdom is done. We're in the final countdown, the last hours, last minutes of Esau's rulership on earth. Okay, so this is from Al Jazeera, and I got a couple different articles dealing with protests and riots and attempted government overthrows, things of that nature, happening. In times past, these things would happen, but they would be few and far in between, spread out. But now it's like popcorn, man. Okay, they're happening. It's popping up all over the place. People pretty much being pissed off with their governments. And a lot of these protests are centered around, Gaza and those small hats over there with their attempted cytogen, all right, which is the Geno, all right, what they're doing to those people over there, causing the Geno, all right, which cytogen, all right, some little ebonics for you, speaking in code. All right, so this is from Al Jazeera. Like I said, it says, new prime minister in Madagascar after protests continue for third week. It says Madagascar President Andre Rajoelina appoints Rufin Fortunat Zypho Sambo Zyphi Sambo, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, after a week of anti-government protests. It says Madagascar's president, Andre Rajoelina, has appointed Rufin Fortunat Zyphi Sambo as prime minister as anti-government protests once again erupted in the country. The appointment of Zyphi Sambo, a military general, on Monday comes a week after the government was dissolved in response to protests. Okay, so the government was dissolved as a result of the protests. All right, so let me do this. And I typed this in earlier on DeepSeek, and I typed in, what does it mean when a government dissolves and what happens? It says, of course, this is an excellent question that gets to the heart of how government how governments function and transition. It says, in simple terms, when a government dissolves, it means the current administration, the executive branch, including the prime minister, cabinet, and ministers, has ceased to function and has relinquished its power. This is different from dissolving a whole legislature like Parliament or Congress, though the two are often connected. Here's a breakdown of what it means and what typically happens next. What does it mean when a government is dissolved? When a government, for a government to dissolve, excuse me, it says a government dissolves when it loses its legal authority to govern. This can happen for several reasons. Loss of confidence in parliamentary systems. It says this is the most common reason. In countries like the UK, Canada, India, and Australia, the government must maintain the confidence of the elected legislature, the lower house. If it loses a majority vote, a vote of no confidence, the government is obligated to dissolve. Completion of term. The government's fixed term has ended. In many systems, this triggers an automatic dissolution before a scheduled election. A political decision. A leader like a prime minister may choose to dissolve the government, to call a new election, often to seek a fresh mandate from the public during a time of crisis, or to capitalize on high approval ratings. A constitutional crisis or coup. In unstable situations, a government can be dissolved by force, by a ruling of a judiciary, or by decree of a head of state, often leading to a period of unelected rule. Okay, so that's just a little background on that. So it says, continuing in this article, it says, however, protesters are now calling on Rajoelina himself to resign. So here it is. You had the president that appointed a new prime minister for Madagascar, but now the protesters themselves want him up out of office. Because the situations, when you read this article, they're dealing with not having running water and things and electricity. All right, and now that's all controlled by some degree. The president has some type of authority over, those conditions. All right, responsibility. All right, so if they've been experiencing that for a long time, they want to see some type of change. All right. It says police fired tear gas at demonstrators on the streets of the capital, and Tananarivo on Monday, the start of the third consecutive week of protests. So they've been protesting for 3 weeks. Okay, it says the unrest began over water and electricity cuts, but has evolved into broader anti-government anger against Rajoelina's administration. All right, and this is, that's pretty much that on. There's more to it, but them not having, you don't got no water and no electricity, that'll make even Babylonians take to the streets. People would say there was no water and electricity for however long. All right, let's just go for 3 weeks here in America, or a capital city, Washington D.C., or a major city, Chicago or New York, L.A., Houston, Dallas, okay, Seattle, Miami, Orlando, some major city, and there's no running water and no electricity. People gonna take to the streets and be looking to take matters into their own hands. Okay, so that's one example of protests going on. Here from Al Jazeera, once again, all these will be from Al Jazeera. This is a mass protest from Amsterdam. And matter of fact, let me see real quick. This article is from today, all right, October 6th. This one here is from yesterday, October 5th. It says mass protest from Amsterdam to Istanbul denounce Israel's Gaza genocide. All right. Cytogen. Oxygen. All right. Little ebonics. Now, when you look at, from Amsterdam to Istanbul, Amsterdam is up in Europe, okay? And Istanbul is pretty much the bridge between Europe and the continent of it's pretty much Asia Minor. It's the bridge between the Middle East and Europe. Okay, that being Turkey. So it says thousands of Turkish citizens take part in a rally in solidarity with Palestinians and to protest against the genocide in Gaza in Istanbul, Turkey, October 5th, 2025. It says hundreds of thousands of people poured onto the streets across Europe demanding an end to Israel's 2-year war on Gaza that has killed more than 67,000 Palestinians and left the enclave on the brink of famine. All right, which they already are experiencing famine because they're over there eating sea turtles, man. Okay, it says the largest protests took place in the Netherlands, which that's up in Europe. Okay, or north of in Europe, north west if I'm not mistaken. It says where about 250,000 people filled Amsterdam's Museum Square on Sunday before marching through the city center. Draped in Palestinian flags and dressed in red, demonstrators demanded that their government take a harder line against Israel and stop arms exports to the occupying power. Okay, because all those, not all, but a lot of, NATO members, are complicit. Well, all of them are complicit, whether they just sit back and say nothing or, actually are, actively sending, weapons, to Israel. All right, a lot of the citizens ain't feeling that, man. Okay, it says the bloodshed must stop, and that we unfortunately have to stand here because we have such an incredibly weak government that doesn't dare to draw a red line. That's why we are here in the hope that it helps, said protester, whatever this dude's name is, Mariki Van Zizl. So like it. The Associated Press News Agency reported these crazy names, man. All right. So these governments, are complicit with, those NATO governments are complicit with the genocide taking place in Palestine. All right. And now another thing you got to remember is a lot of these NATO nations have had a large influx of Muslim immigrants coming from all over the Middle East, invading their countries. Okay, so you have a large Muslim population in those NATO nations. All right, look at Germany, for instance. There's a lot of foreign people. Germany is a shit show, man. Okay, but this is another protest going on. And as I said, this is from Istanbul to Amsterdam. All right. Here's another one. It says pressure mounts on Meloni's government as Gaza protesters paralyze Italy. All right. Union says more than 2 million protested Friday with massive turnout expected Saturday for Rome protests. All right. It says hundreds, and this is from October 3rd, which is a couple days ago, 3 days ago. It says hundreds of thousands of people have taken to the streets across Italy as part of a general strike in solidarity with the global summoned flotilla that was intercepted by Israel this week while trying to bring aid to Palestinians in Gaza. So you had a flotilla that was attempting to bring aid to Gaza that was intercepted by the Israelis. All right. And that aid and that food was not able to get to them. It says more than 2 million people attended Friday's protest after the strike was called by a number of trade unions in defense of the flotilla, which was carrying a total of 40 Italians and 2 Stop the Genocide. The CGIL, Italian General Confederation of Labor wrote on X. Turin-based daily La Stampa reported that the mobilization involved the public and private sectors, halting rail, air, metro, and bus transportation, healthcare, and schools. Among the many acts of dissent, protesters blocked highways near Pisa, Pescara, Bologna, and Milan, and shut down access to the port of Livorno, said the newspaper. It says police told the news agency AFP that more than 80,000 people demonstrated in Milan, where a sea of people clapped and waved the Palestinian flag as they made their way through the streets, carrying a massive banner reading "Free Palestine, Stop the Machine War." The war machine. This is not just any strike. We're here to, well, whatever. All right. So that's another example of a protest. Okay. Uproars of the people. And then here in Georgia, all right, which Georgia, the country of Georgia is south, west of Russia. Okay. So, and this is from yesterday, October 5th. It says Georgia Prime Minister says protesters tried to overthrow government, vows crackdown. Okay. It says Georgia Prime Minister has said protesters who tried storming the presidential palace were trying to overthrow the government, and he has accused the European Union of meddling in his country's politics. All right. So the European Union, the EU, is being accused of meddling in Georgia's politics. You know, now you gotta know that the EU would want, complete control over Georgia, being that it's next door neighbors to Russia. Okay, so they would love to have a new puppet put up in office in there. All right, so this is Irakli Kobakhides, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, said on Sunday that opposition demonstrators aim to overthrow the constitutional order, and added that EU Ambassador Paweł Herzzinski, whom he accused of supporting the rally, bore special responsibility. I'm gonna just call him Kobe or Koba. Koba called Herx, all right, to distance himself and strictly condemn everything that is happening on the streets of Tbilisi, or whatever, however you say it. It says the Georgian news agency Interpress reported. Koba also pledged to completely neutralize foreign agents. Georgian riot police used pepper spray and water cannons on Saturday to drive demonstrators away from the presidential palace in Tbilisi, or however you say that, city center, and detained 5 activists as the opposition staged a large demonstration on a day of local elections. So peep that. So this was on a day that, elections was taking place. So things is moving, man. The Lord got things moving in the earth, man. Okay, so with that, I want to grab this here in 2nd Ezra, chapter 9, verse 1. It says, "He answered me then and said, Measure thou the time diligently in itself, and when thou seest part of the signs pass, which I have told thee before, then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the realm which he made." All right, so the Lord telling us that these things was going to happen. All right, this is how they're going to start and this is how they're going to end. And when you use that metrics of measurement, so to say, we see that this is exactly the time that the Lord spoke of. Okay, this we in them times, man. Make no doubt about it. That things ain't gonna simmer down and people go back to being docile and governments getting over on people and doing all kind of left-handed BS and people just going along with the flow, in bliss and ignorance. This ain't them times, man. Okay, people have been awakened to, how corrupt governments are, and you're gonna have people that's gonna crash out, versus, they'll willingly crash out via these protests and things of that nature, versus sitting back being docile. Okay, these people getting lied to about the Crown Royal 2020. Feel extremely stupid that they believed all that. And a lot of these people was juiced up and are infuriated at that and know that, damn, they can't even trust their government, and they know that all these governments are complicit. So they looking to get some payback, man. Okay. Verse 2, it says, then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made. And eventually the Heavenly Father is going to allow Yahweh Shai and the angels to pull up. You know what I'm saying? Crack them clouds. All right. Peekaboo. That's what's going to happen to the earth, man. Therefore, when there shall be seen earthquakes and uproars of the people in the world, which we see that, then shalt thou well understand that the Most High spake of those things from the days that were before thee, even from the beginning. All right. So the Heavenly Father prophesied of the end, even in the beginning. Okay. The Lord prophesied of what's taking place in the earth currently, well before any of us was even conceived on this earth. All right. So it's beautiful that we in the times of these things actually coming to pass. All right, because we know that our salvation draws nigh. Verse 5, it says, for like as all that is made in the world hath a beginning and an end, and the end is manifest. All right, so with these prophecies coming to pass, in the uproars of the people in particular being normalized in the earth, it becoming a normal thing to see, okay, this government is there was a coup attempted on this government, or these people are rioting in this place. These people burnt down, their parliament. These people, did this, did that. That's the Most High showing the manifestation of the end, man. Verse 6, it says, even so, the times also of the highest have plain beginnings and wonders and powerful works and endings and effects and signs. All right, so these events taking place are signs that let us know that we definitely are in the end. Okay. So let me grab this in Matthew 24. I'm going to start at 3. I'm going to read this in the NLT. I'm going to start at 3 and read down. It says, later Yahushua sat on the Mount of Olives. His disciples came to him privately and said, tell us, when will all this happen? What sign will signal your your return and the end of the world? Yahushua told them, don't let anyone mislead you. All right, so the disciples want to know, what can we look for that's going to be an indication of your returning back to the planet? Okay. Because they knew that, hey, the kingdom of heaven will be established when Yahushua returns. Okay? Verse 5, it says, "For many will come in my name, claiming I am the Messiah. They will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and threats of wars, but don't panic." Okay? So we're hearing of wars and threats of wars. We're hearing of shit. We see Russia and Ukraine. All right? We hear of potential, eventual kinetic war between China and in the U.S., Russia and the U.S. Eventually things is gonna get kinetic. You got ultimately, nations gearing up for war, strategizing and making sure they got the resources and the artillery and things of that nature to be successful in their minds. All right, but we're not to panic. All right, despite us seeing all these things, we're not to panic. Yes, these things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. Okay. And look at Russia and Ukraine. They've been at war 3 years already. All right. Nation will go to war against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world. And we see, hey, look at Gaza. They're experiencing famine. There's a certain apps, earthquake apps that brothers download where it tells you of all the earthquakes that take place on a daily basis. Places that never used to have earthquakes is having earthquakes like it's nothing. Verse 8, it says, "But all this is only the first of the birth pains, with more to come." All right, so there's more to come, man. We ain't seen nothing yet, man. Things is only gonna get worse. But the beautiful thing is, hey, the Lord's gonna be with his elect. Okay, that's what we got to hope in. The mercy and the grace of Yahweh Shem Yahushai. So we're like the news reporters, man. This going on around us, but it's like we're not affected by it, even though we are affected by it. All right, but our job is to hunker down and report the news. All right, being these spiritual electronic epistles, that get uploaded to the internet. All right, these videos we do, these lessons. All right, 2 Ezra 15 and 14, it says, "Woe to the world and them that dwell therein." All right, destruction. So all these people, these idiots, you see protesting and, complaining about their governments and, really invested into this society. All right, these people who don't see anything outside of, this world and this fictitious world. All right, this fiat world. Destruction to all of them, man. Okay, you even got Israelites invested in this shit. And destruction to you. "For the sword and the destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands." So it's going to get real crazy out here to where it's going to be civil war. All right? You're going to have neighbors robbing and killing each other. Arson. You see the judge who, Diane Goodstein in South Carolina, her house was burnt down. All right. There was a couple people in there. I believe her husband and like a couple grandkids or something like that. And that house was on an island, southeastern part of South Carolina. Once you get to the coast, it's large swaths of land that actually are made up of islands. So she actually lived on an island, a big old island, and her shit got burned down. Now, whether that was started by somebody in the house or some arsonists, or who knows? All right, the investigation is still underway by what I've by way of what I read earlier pertaining to that situation. But there's gonna be all kind of crazy things happening once you know society collapses even further. All right, it says in verse 16, it says, "For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes." All right, all these governments, coups taking place. All right, you got like over in we read the article dealing with Madagascar, the president. They got the government dissolved, was ineffective, so the president appointed a new prime minister, but the people was like, "No, we want you out of office." Okay, so they're not regarding their kings or princes. They even attacked in that article uh here in Georgia. All right, what did it say? They they attacked the Capitol. Let me see. Hold on, where's that? Let me see. So like, bear with me. Yeah. Okay. So it says Koba said nearly 7,000 people participated in the protest in the capital of the South Caucasus country of 3.7 million people. Thought it was something that said the actual the building got attacked or something like that. All right. So, but anyways, jumping back to this, it says, "In the course of their actions shall stand in their power. A man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able, for because of their pride, the city shall be troubled, and houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid." So things is gonna get real crazy, man. Crazier than what they already are through the spirit. But this is a good sign. These uproars of the people is a good sign for us true believers, because we know that our salvation is near. All right, so with that, Apparatus Artist has been edifying. Till next time, Shalom.